Welcome to Behind the Badge. This podcast aims to improve the health and well-being of frontline workers. Each episode features candid conversations with former and current frontline community members and subject matter experts. Join us as we explore the unique nature of serving in high-risk roles, sharing inspiring stories of resilience, strategies, and resources. We are not qualified health professionals, nor are we aligned with any organization. The opinions expressed in the podcast are solely our own. Additionally, the content may evoke strong emotional responses for some. Listener discretion is advised.
I don't wanna promise that we have an answer, and I don't wanna promise that we know the way. I just wanna bury the guilt of the nature like a tidal
G'day everyone, welcome back. Today, Jason and I are joined by a guest who has lived the motto, earned, not given, from the ground up. Shaun Kober is a former infantry sniper with deployments to Iraq, Timor and Afghanistan, where his actions earned him a Commendation for Gallantry. However, his story didn't stop when he took the uniform off. He's now a world-class strength and conditioning coach and has trained elite fighters across multiple fight promotions such as the UFC, the PFL, and one championship. He spent a number of years as head coach at Tiger Muay Thai in Thailand, and more recently he's taken his own fight career into the cage, proving that his training methods are battle-tested both on and off the field. From combat to coaching, he brings a philosophy built on discipline, personal responsibility, and showing up when it counts. Whether you're in uniform, on the mats, or just trying to level up in life, this episode will challenge you to demand more from yourself and do the work. Let's do it. Welcome to the show, Shaun Kober. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We just had a great chat offline, so I'm sure we'll touch on a lot of those things.
Definitely.
I hope I can remember it.
I'll prompt you.
So, Shaun, what we like to do is build a bit of context for some of the listeners, mate. And I know that you've got a bit of an interesting story in your upbringing. So if we could start like at the start of your timeline and talk about sort of your upbringing and the sort of the things that shaped you.
Yeah, cool. Eldest of 6 kids. I don't know my father. Grew up in this area. We're in Beerwah now, so lived in Jimna. First school I went to had 18 students from preschool through to grade 7. I actually went and visited there a couple of days ago. It was a bit of a trip to go back there and and see the building, which is not operating as a school anymore. But yeah, small town. Lived in Kilcoy, Diagula just down the road. And yeah, like I said, eldest of 6 kids. Poor family. Didn't have any electricity or running water for 6 years of my life. When we moved from this area to a place called Tara, which is out near Toowoomba, Dalby area. Moved up to North Queensland when I was 13, I believe. Was good at sports, was making the regional teams for rugby, soccer, cricket. Went to national championships state championships for sprinting as well. Moved up to Darwin when I was 14, left home, went into the workforce and had a few years up there, and then started playing rugby union. Was selected in the schoolboys combined states team, which was a combination of Northern Territory, South Australia, Victoria, Tasmania, and WA. And then went to Sydney on a scholarship and spent a couple of years down there playing rugby with Gordon Rugby Club, going through the Colts, and then left there, moved back to Darwin, and joined the army when I was 20.
What was the catalyst for joining the military? Like, did you have any other family or influencing factors that sort of drew you towards that?
Not really. My parents didn't work when I was growing up, and I always looked at anyone in the uniform as kind of a noble job. When I was in Darwin for a couple of years, I always saw, soldiers walking around in their cams, and I was like, that's something that I want to do. So yeah, I had a couple years down in Sydney, and then was kind of at that crossroads of, do I go and become a professional rugby player and walk down that path, or do I want to go and put the uniform on? And yeah, decided to move back to Darwin and join the army.
Nice. Just a quick little back step. So you moved to Darwin at 14, entered the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing as a 14-year-old in the workforce?
I was shifting cement bags, like 20 ton to 40 ton every day. Yeah.
Good honest work.
Good honest work, yeah. Taking them out of a shipping container and putting them on pallets and wrapping them up. I actually got my forklift license before I got my car license.
Jeez. That's not easy work, especially for a young bloke too.
Yeah. Now I got that old man strength.
Mate, so back to Darwin, 20 years old, joined army.
Yep.
Down to Kapuka.
Yeah, Kapuka for, I think it was 12 weeks. And then off to Singleton as an infantry soldier. Spent probably 5 weeks there in holding platoon. At that stage, this was 2006. At that stage, everything was kicking off, and a lot of young men wanted to join the army and go overseas and fight in wars. So yeah, they'd hit their quotas, and they were essentially looking for, more staff to train these new recruits to get them into the infantry battalions. So I ended up moving back to Darwin, and we did our initial employment training up there.
Yeah, and that's not commonplace, right? Normally your IETs will be done at the School of Infantry in Singleton. Yep. Was there ever any anything else apart from infantry, or was that it?
No, I wanted to be an infantry soldier. Yeah, when I first joined, I wanted to be an assault pioneer because I'd been working in Sydney at a rental company, and I was servicing like jackhammers and saws, and they had excavators, mini excavators, and I can't remember what those other things were. The little bobcats and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. I enjoyed that type of work, and when I joined as an infantry soldier, they essentially gave us a list of career paths that we could take as an infantry soldier, and I wanted to become an assault pioneer. But then once we got to Darwin, I realised that the unit didn't have any.
They didn't have
any assault pioneers. No.
So what unit?
I went to 5-7 RAL.
Yep. Okay.
In Darwin. Yep.
And like I said, so you did your IETs in the unit up there at 5-7?
That's correct. Yeah.
So how was that?
It was awesome, man. I enjoyed it. I was there with all of the guys that I'd gone through all of my training with at Kapuka, and then through holding platoon in Singleton. And I remember actually we were in Singleton, and our platoon sergeant came out and was like, "Right, who wants to go to Darwin?" I was the only person to put my hand up. I was like, "Right, all of you guys are going with recruit Kober." And the collective groan went through the ranks. But yeah, I obviously lived in Darwin prior to that, so I enjoyed getting back up to Darwin. I had kind of my army mates that I'd gone through all my training with, and then I had my rugby mates and I want to say school mates, but I didn't actually go to school up there. But all my mates there were at school at the time.
How did you find Kapuka and IETs? Did you find that, like, I guess, difficult, or was it pretty easy to adjust into it, like a different culture and I guess a different way of doing things?
It was a little bit of a shock, like going from being a 14-year-old, moving out of home and just kind of running my life the way that I wanted to then having everything structured and organised, and A, B, C, D, E, F, G, can't go to bed until 10 o'clock at night. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process, and I think it was good for me to have that kind of discipline instilled in me, and I enjoyed the team element of it as well. That was probably the best part for me, was going through difficult things with other people as well.
Yep. Probably something you were exposed to, I'm guessing, in your like rugby stuff before as well, probably set you up for that.
Yeah, for sure. Coming from a team sport environment the majority of my life, definitely set me up for success going through that training process.
Sweet. Complete IETs, mate, and then posting into the unit. Then what for yourself?
And then right after we marched into the unit, actually they split. So 5-7 then became 5 RAR and 7 RAR. Again, like I said, at the time there was a lot of people joining the army, so they needed something to put these young guys who had just become soldiers, put them somewhere where they could be utilised. So half the guys the majority of the unit that were overseas, half of them went into 5 RAR and half of them went into 7 RAR. We had guys, I think, in Iraq and Afghanistan at the time, and the guys in Iraq then went into 5 RAR, and then we started preparing for our trip to Iraq the following year, 2007. And the guys that were in Afghanistan came back into 7 RAR, and they essentially did the same thing and started ramping up for Afghan as well.
Yeah, right. So, you just said Iraq the following year, so 2007.
2007, yeah.
So, not a lot of preparation time then for a young dig, adjusting to battalion life.
No, not at all.
Straight into it.
Yeah, joined in March 2006, completed the training process, I want to say November or December, and then in June we were in Iraq.
Quick turnaround,
yeah, 15 months or so. And then once we got back from Iraq, that was a 6-month deployment. Once we got back from there, I think I was only in country for maybe 10 months. We had to get wavered before we then went off to East Timor.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Obviously, East Timor is a little bit of a different beast to Iraq. How did you find those two?
Yeah, I enjoyed both deployments. As a soldier, I'm sure you guys have these conversations, or you've heard people talking about this. Like, as a soldier, you don't get to do your job until you're overseas. So, the majority of the time you're training, and you don't really get to do your job until you get overseas. So, different roles, different experiences. But that was why we joined.
Yep.
Yes, we wanted to go and fight in wars, but we also wanted to, experience everything that being a soldier brought. And sometimes that is peacekeeping. Sometimes that is, disaster relief.
Yep. Following East Timor, you then went to Afghan not long after. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we were back for maybe 15 months or so, and went through the training process, courses, upskilling, promotions, etc., and then mission-specific training, or training exercises, mission-specific training, and then mission rehearsal exercise before we went to Afghanistan in 2010.
So I've just had a thought there. You've had a very busy period from the time you sort of got to the battalion, those 3 deployments. Now, I know that you deployed on Afghan in a sniper team. Mm-hmm. At what point did you do your sniper courses? Was that post-Timor?
Pre-Timor.
Right.
We actually started. So I got back from Iraq, and then did sub 2 for corporal. I think it's called SIOS course, supervisor infantry operations of section. And then so we basically got back from a 6-month deployment in Iraq, and then did 2-month course. And then I went into recon platoon, recon snipers, to do on the job training, and then was nominated for the snipers course prior to Timor. And we actually kicked off our training process before we went to Timor, and then we completed the snipers course in Timor. We had a very good commanding officer that was really switched on and understood that, it was going to be lower tempo in Timor. So he put together a training cycle that, got a heap of guys qualified, obviously knowing that there was a likelihood that we were going to be gearing up for Afghanistan in the future. So, yeah, they did a really good job at the time of upskilling and getting guys qualified.
How good.
Whilst in Timor. Yeah, it was really good.
So
I did the majority of my snipers course in Timor, which was awesome, man. Yeah,
that's
really,
cool.
Really, really enjoyed that.
Did that then, once you got qualified, change your role in country at all, or in Timor, that is?
So I went into Timor with the recon snipers teams, platoon. So we were the QRF for the battle group. We got an opportunity to train with the Black Hawks, and did a few bits and pieces out on the islands, and yeah, it was a really cool role, and that obviously led into joining the sniper cell and gearing up for Afghanistan after that.
Yeah, awesome. So on that Afghanistan, you were awarded the Commendation for Gallantry. you want to just talk us through a little bit about that day and that incident, and then I guess leading on from that, the rest of the trip as well?
Yeah, so we're in Afghan for probably 2 weeks. We've gone through the handover takeover process with 6RR, who were there prior to us. So they were leading all the nursery patrols and just giving us a lay of the ground. And then obviously the Taliban knew they knew the handover takeover process, and they're like, all right, once these guys fly out and the Chinook's gone and all these guys are loaded up on that, then these guys are going to be exposed and they're going to be fresh. And yeah, we got information that there was 20 Taliban in the area. Ran into them first thing in the morning when we stepped out on patrol as they were coming out of a mosque, and we're like, oh, here we go, we know why these guys are here. So did all the biometrics and searched them and that type of stuff, and obviously they didn't have anything on them, so we continued the patrol, and engineers were tasked with searching specific areas, a hotspot where they'd normally cache weapons and munitions, etc. And my sniper team was conducting a satellite patrol, so we were, kind of had our freedom of movement to bounce around and go where we were needed or where we thought best to interdict anyone laying ambushes or IEDs or anything like that. And once we got word that the engineers had finished their search, we started moving towards the breakout zone so that we could essentially find a spot to clear so that the rest of the boys could basically pass over these big aqueducts that were like 2 meters deep, 2 meters wide. They were obviously choke points, so as we were moving towards those areas, atmospherics started deteriorating, and guys were coming out and calling their kids and gathering their goats and stuff, and we're like, oh, this is not good. And then there was one guy that was walking down the footpath, and I just remember saying to my mate Tamps, I was like, you got me? And he's like, yeah, I got you. Called out to this guy. I had my rifle in the shoulder, and he saw me, turned to run, and I obviously had one in the chamber already, but I cocked it just to let him know. And then he came over. I ended up searching him, and my team leader was like, hey, Talib. And this guy like turns around and points in the opposite direction. It just lit up, rounds kicking off everywhere, and yeah, just hit the deck and started trying to identify firing points, gathering all my my equipment that was in my bag. I had the X-spray kit, so I'd wiped his hands and his clothes and stuff like that, and sprayed to try and see if we could identify any incriminating evidence. And yeah, I turned, and my mate Tamps was firing into firing positions, and he was behind like a small brick wall, mud brick wall that was probably a meter or so. So I just got up and legged it over there, jumped over, and was listening out for where these firing points were. And I couldn't identify a person or people shooting, but we could, see where they were firing from. So I just started lobbing 40mm grenades, and they make a bit of a boom. And I looked over, and my teammate was on his ass. My team leader was on his ass he was firing single-handedly and trying to put his tourniquet on. And
so he'd been
shot. He'd been hit in the initial ambush, yeah. So we pushed over to him, and the firefight went on for probably maybe a couple of minutes at that point. And the rest of the team who had just finished the search, they came sprinting in, and they had a position where we then dragged Seamus back to kick off the treatment process. And then the infantry section, who were the security section for the Omelette team, which was the operational mentor liaison team, that was training the Afghani soldiers, they then continued the fight and followed through and did some damage. And we basically started patching our team leader up and got on the comms and called in the Black Hawks to come and extract him. And then there was obviously 3 of us left in our sniper team. It was 4-man sniper team. So one of the guys was down. And then as the rest of the security section were pushing through and continuing the fight, then we ended up making our way up onto some high ground so we could, provide battlefield commentary and identify targets and just keep overwatch. And we ended up sitting on top of an IED that didn't go off, luckily. Wow. Yeah. So that was pretty crazy welcome to country. And then we got back to base, and obviously the adrenaline dump was massive, and I just remember sleeping for a couple of hours, and then the boss comes in and he's like, all right, we've got orders tonight, and then went into orders and he's like, we're back out again tomorrow. So yeah, went back out again the next day, and there's a few things that kind of led up to this, but at one point burst of machine gun fire went between my mate and I, and I assumed that he was firing at something, and he was like, that wasn't me, man. So it's like, fuck, here we go again. So I just rolled over and like looked over on the ridge line. There was a guy who was illuminated. They hit us at dusk, and yeah, same thing, just started lobbing 40 mil grenades, and yeah, that was a pretty crazy welcome to the country. And you know, the next couple of weeks it was like couldn't sleep very well, and obviously running these what if scenarios, and you know, my team leader's been hit, and I've almost been killed multiple times with the ambush, and then sitting on the IED that didn't go off, and then the machine gun fire that went between us. And yeah, at that point I just kind of had to figure out on my own how to get to sleep, and I ended up settling on breathwork, essentially, yeah, to help manage my mind and get to sleep and stop running these what if scenarios, and that led to then, you know, being more proactive with my mindset rather than reactive.
So how did you come up with? Sorry, Josh. How did you come up with that concept of the breathwork? Obviously, it's this something that's relatively new, well, in our world anyway. But it's just sort of coming in. But is it pre-training or something that you were doing prior to the defence? Or
No. I think it was just out of necessity, because after a couple of weeks, I obviously wasn't sleeping very well, and every time, you know, we were going past a certain area, and the 6 RAR lads, you know, they said, once you go past this line, shit's always going to happen. So yeah, every time we went in that direction, it was like, fuck, man, we could be happening here. Like, what if this happens? What if that happens? And yeah, it was just born out of necessity. You know, nobody taught me that. It was just, initially I started counting sheep, and I was like, well, that's not working. And then I was like, what else can I do? And I just settled on the breath. And yeah, I would just literally every night I would just lay down and take a deep breath in, exhale, and just as my mind would run off, I'd like, no, come back to the breath. And it's like, what's the one thing that I can focus on right now? And over time, you know, over the next couple of weeks, I found that, you know, I could get higher and higher in my count, and you know, every time my mind would run off, I might only get 2 breaths in, and then my mind would run off, and I'd be gone for a couple of minutes. I'm like, oh fuck, breathe. 1, and then I would find that I'd get to 10, and then before I got to 20, I'd normally be asleep.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Like it's cool that like you settled on that, because you were at whereabouts were you?
Cop Marshal.
So
Bellucci.
You can't just pull your phone out or get on the computer and research, like, how do I help myself get to sleep or whatever. Like, the resources are not readily available. So that the fact that you naturally settled on that, I find absolutely fascinating. Like, that's unreal.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I think you well deserved, your brain's well deserved to go, I can't sleep. I mean, listening to what you went through, I think I'd be on the next plane home myself. But I'm done.
Well, on that, so thankfully you did, you know, find that regulation method. Obviously stayed for the rest of the trip. How was that? Did things settle down a little bit, or was it just was that the way that it was going to be for the rest of the trip?
There were like quieter periods, but yeah, we were in a pretty red area. So there was always a threat there.
Yep.
Yeah, and the guys before us had done some damage as well to, you know, key leaders in the area. So, you know, obviously Taliban wanted to get back some territory and get back some space and some control. So, you know, they went through periods where they were bringing guys in and bringing the fight to us as well. So, yeah.
Wow. Was there any? I can only imagine landing in a hot spot. Was there any hesitation coming from all areas, Iraq, Timor, Afghanistan, newish to the Defence Force? Was there any sort of, I don't know if hesitation's the right word, but, you know, at what point you trained that well, and, you know, obviously you push through that. But for me, as a non-defence person, I'd be thinking the whole time, this is going to be dangerous. Do I really want to be here? This, you know, that is, yeah, hats off to you.
Yeah, you know, obviously when we first arrived, we were keen to get into the firefight, and once that happened, realised it was a two-way range. You just kind of change your mind a little bit. And you're like, fuck, man, what can we do to negate this threat before it becomes like deadly? I had this conversation with the psych at the end of the trip. We were there for 9 months, and at the end of the trip, I walked into the psych's office, and the psych was like, Corporal Kober, I know who you are. I know what you've done. I know you've pulled the trigger. I know you've treated your mates. Is there anything you regret? And I kind of sat with it for what felt like, a couple of minutes, but was probably only about 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And I said, yeah, I regret not pulling the trigger more. She jotted down her notes and looked at me, and she goes, do you care to explain that? And I was like, yeah, when we first arrived, we were new. We didn't want to break any rules. We didn't want to, as a sniper, people think our job is pulling the trigger, and whilst it can be, that's not the main part of the job. However, when there is a threat that needs to be taken care of, then ideally you want to take care of that threat, because if you don't, then you're putting your life in danger, your teammates' lives in danger, coalition forces, our allies on the ground. So there were times early on in the trip, especially, where we were giving people the benefit of the doubt, and at times we did pay for that. So as the trip went on, we again became a lot more proactive with how we're conducting ourselves, rather than reactive, rather than waiting for us to get lit up. We would be searching for targets.
Just want to touch on for a minute. I think you alluded there to your role as a sniper team. Obviously, key asset in the battle space, and it goes beyond, like you said, just looking down that barrel and killing the enemy. But that's a very large part of what you do as well. So, knowing that in the lead up, how do you prepare to do that? Because I'm assuming in East Timor you didn't have to do that. Afghan's different story. So how do you, I guess, mentally prepare yourself that that's going to be your job and that's what you're going to potentially have to do?
I remember being on a training exercise probably a couple of months before we deployed, and my sniper team was down in Albury, I want to say. We're doing like a first aid based exercise, and whilst we were there, the CEO ended up putting a pause on the exercise because that day there was 2 guys that were killed in Afghanistan, 2 engineers and their detection dog. And I just remember our team sitting down having a conversation during that pause X, and being upfront and honest with each other, and being like, well, it's real. This is where we're going to be going to these areas, and there's a high chance that we're going to be pulling the trigger, and there's a possibility that one of us may not come home, or we may come home in permanently disfigured or whatever. So we had those real genuine conversations, and I think that helped just kind of allowed us to dial up our focus and intent with the training cycle that we had coming up, knowing that shit was going to get real, and there was every possibility that not all of us would make it home. So those conversations, I think, really helped dial in and just kind of make things real. And at the end of the day, you can talk about these things as much as possible, as much as you want, but until you're actually in the shit and there's bullets flying around you, you don't really know how you're going to react. So that's where the training, you just hope the training that you're doing takes over and serves you well.
Yeah, and I guess, like you said, if you've got that, whatever you want to call it, if you can have that realistic point of view about what you're doing and some of the, I guess the more negative consequences of where you're going and what you're doing, that can be a very powerful motivator for your preparation and for your training.
Yeah, absolutely.
I look at that across, that could be fire, police, army, whatever that is. If you have a look and go, well, this is where we could end up. Yeah. So what can we do to mitigate that?
I think that extends out to life as well. understanding that shit doesn't always go your way, and sometimes things are going to be bad, and you're going to be facing adversity. So what can you do to kind of build that resilience shield? I know you guys spoke to Ben Pronk. I listened to that episode the other day, and that's a lot of things that he was saying really resonated with. You need to, again, be proactive with how you're going to build that resilience shield, knowing that adversity is going to come along at some point, and and you're going to need to react to it.
Yeah, but I think the fact that you were able to have that conversation, most people would probably not tend to go there. They would want to ignore the the consequence side maybe, but having that conversation, I mean,
powerful.
Very, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, just sets that mindset prior to going in, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's cool. Very, very powerful stuff to have, be able to talk about that prior, and knowing the culture as well. It's probably a difficult conversation to have. A lot of the blokes would, like I said, just shut it, deal with it in their own space, and not air that, or it'd be difficult to. It'd be a vulnerable conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Massive credit to my team leaders and the guys in the sniper cell. That there was a reason why those guys were in that cell. We kind of were expected to think outside the box, and we're expected to, we deployed as a 4-man team. The sniper cell was 12 strong, and there was times where we would split up in our 4-man team and venture off in 2-man teams, so that's a very real threat, that you can be isolated and have to fend for yourself. So, those conversations were very important in our development and in that training process to help us prepare for what was to come.
Yeah, awesome. How much do you think your upbringing played in the resilience that you showed, particularly in that trip, but I imagine throughout your defence career? Do you attribute some of your ability to function and operate in those environments to the adversities and the hardships that you'd faced growing up?
For sure. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I hated my childhood as I was going through it. I didn't hate it. Like I had good times and bad, but it definitely steeled me for what was to come later on in life and helped me get through. Like I said, the training process, even going through Kapuka, I think I dealt with that a lot better than the majority of people who'd just come out of school and hadn't really been away from home. Big culture shock for them. Obviously, it brought some different challenges for me, but, it helped kind of consolidate everything that I'd learned up to that point and kind of just tidied me up as a person, I think, and as a soldier going forward. I'm grateful for those difficult times and those challenges of not having running water and electricity and stuff growing up. And I laugh now because people ask me, have you seen this movie? I'm like, I haven't seen any movies.
What's this movie you keep talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. I missed all that, so I definitely appreciate it now. It's going through those things younger, and then that helped me through my military career, and then even the transition out of the army. I think I dealt with that pretty well compared to the majority of people. But I also had a good support network as well.
So sort of beat me to the next question, which was that transition out. So 2011, you finished up at Afghan and came home?
2011, yeah. End of 2011, then I discharged 2012.
How was that coming back? Like, obviously super busy career in the military. How did you go coming back? How did you go at the back end of those 3 deployments, and what was the catalyst to move on?
End of 2011. So I was actually in Afghan when one of the officers, he was in the rugby mafia, let's say, he told me to contact the then ASRU coach, because at the end of 2011 there was a Defence Force World Cup coming up, and when I joined the army, one of the reasons I joined was because I was told you could still play rugby. And up until that point, I hadn't played rugby because I was deploying and training. So yeah, I was keen to get back and try and make the Australian Services rugby union team. So basically got back, when was that? June 2011. And then, everyone else went on leave, and I was in the gym on the training paddock. I went down to Canberra and played in a trial match down there, and then ended up making the ASRU team. So I went basically into camp as essentially a professional athlete, where we're training twice a day and traveling around Australia preparing for this rugby competition. So I didn't really have a chance to decompress too much. I was going through a rough time with my then girlfriend as well. Little side note, like one of the guys, the cook that was on our base at Marshall, he was murdered by one of the Afghani soldiers like a couple of weeks before we returned home. And obviously had been a busy deployment, and went through that whole process of trying to transition back from being in Afghanistan to then being back home in Australia, and everything's safe and everyone's complaining about
Nothing.
Nothing really. I just remember being with my then girlfriend. We went out for brunch, and she called the waiter back over after they dropped the food off, and started complaining about her coffee not being hot enough and the eggs weren't cooked properly. And I was just like, what the fuck, man? Like, what are you complaining about this stuff for? So I ended up going through a really rough time with her, going away, playing rugby, and then basically got back from that trip and had a letter in the mail saying that I'd been nominated for the Commendation for Gallantry. And got back to work, and we went through this big reorg process where all the senior leaders, all the commanders, like the junior non-commissioned officers and junior leaders, were then being taken out of their sections and put into, like, snipers got pretty much disbanded and put into these sections to be the commanders for the next generation coming through. And I just remember looking around and I was like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, they've got no drive, no motivation to do anything. I've just come from this environment where, I don't have to look over the shoulder of my teammate next to me. I know that he's squared away. He's gone through the same training that I've gone through. We've met the same standards. And I just remember just kind of not being happy. I was like, I want to be in the sniper teams, man. Like, they're my people. And then around about the same time, we had a new CEO come in, and he was basically like, we're not deploying. Deployments have dried up. However, we're going to be out bush for 8 months next year. My mates and I just looked at each other and were like, what the fuck, man? No thanks. Yeah. There's a few other bits and pieces where basically it was mentioned that the guys who'd been in for a couple of years at that stage were cancer and need to be cut out with a chainsaw. And it was just a massive cultural change that was undergoing at the time. So yeah, there's a few things, and got to the point where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And when I first joined, I actually wanted to go Special Forces. But at that point, I'd obviously been in snipers for a couple of years and, deployed twice with recon snipers. And I felt like I'd tick the boxes that I'd wanted to tick when I first joined. And I was like, all right, I think it's time for the next chapter. And I looked around, and, majority of my mates that I'd gone through all the training with and that I'd been in snipers with, they'd either put their discharge paperwork in, had posted, or had gone off for Special Forces training. And, I just felt like it was the right time to move on.
What did you have your sights set on, once you'd made that decision to step out of defence? What did that look like for you? What did you want to do?
I actually applied to become a fiery. Went through the process, got to the final interview, didn't get accepted. My main priority was to become a fiery and then to train people on the off days as well. So I got the Army to pay for my PT course, and then obviously didn't get accepted in the fireys, and I was like, all right, I'll start building my business. And then met a girl, moved down to Tasmania, and then ended up travelling the world. Basically had like 18 months off after I got back from Afghanistan, and like I said, played rugby. Had an awesome year in the gym on the rugby paddock. Met a girl, followed her across the country, and then went travelling. So yeah, had an awesome time. And when I didn't get accepted for the fireys, I was like, all right, I'll apply again next year. I'll build my business in the meantime. And started training people and realised that I enjoyed doing that, and continued down that path. And then went down the strength and conditioning route, and again, coming from that kind of elite background with snipers, I was like, all right, I want to work with those types of people again. Where am I going to find that? Athletes. And obviously I left school at 14, left home, didn't have a degree, didn't go to university. There wasn't many opportunities in Tasmania. And on that travel around the world, 2013, I ended up in Thailand doing some training over there at one of the Muay Thai camps. So, I ended up moving over there in 2017 and started working with athletes and kind of built my name and reputation, and that kind of culminated with winning a world title with UFC bantamweight champion Piotr Jan. He flew me to Russia during the pandemic, and then I was in his corner for his title fight. And yeah.
How good.
How good.
Wow.
What an experience.
Yeah, amazing.
The decision to go down that route through into the fitness industry, do you think that came from your athletic background as a kid, or was that an interest built through Army? Because obviously, PT's a heavy feature in any soldier's day. Do you think that was a pre-existing thing that you had, or?
Yeah, like I said, way back at the start, but like I got to those crossroads, and I was like, I'm either going to go and join the Army, or I'm going to try and become a professional athlete myself. So, it just felt like the natural progression.
Yeah, cool. And so Army I paid for your PT course, and then you went and did a strength and conditioning course.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between the two, and what is a strength and conditioning coach?
Personal trainer is somebody who works with everybody, but primarily everyday people. And there's a lot of mindset, there's a lot of nutrition. And I mean, essentially the difference between a PT is you're trying to convince people to move and eat well and sleep properly and, do things for themselves that's going to benefit them. As strength and conditioning coach, working with athletes, majority of the time I'm pulling these athletes back from training so much, that they end up burning themselves out. So strength and conditioning is more of a kind of, I don't want to say it's a holistic approach, because it's not the case right across the board. But for me, strength and conditioning is more of that holistic approach of, I'm looking at heart rate variability and waking heart rate and stress physiology, how I can program for someone to elicit the most response from the least amount of work. I mean, that carries over to the everyday person as well. But in saying that, with an athlete, there's a lot of other factors to consider. An athlete, that is their job. Professional athletes, they are getting paid to do that thing. And, I need to come up with a concurrent training program that's going to tick the boxes of what they need without affecting their other training sessions. I mean, that's, again, we kind of spoke about this offline. As a PT, I was essentially doing the same thing, and I found that, what I was doing with my PT business and what I was doing with regular people, that carried over to what I was doing with athletes. And then I'm at a stage now where I'm like, well, what I'm doing with athletes, that applies to regular people as well. It's just a matter of how I introduce these things and how I turn the dials of, you need a little bit more of this, a little bit less of this. And I mean, essentially, as a coach, it's giving people what they need, cutting through the bullshit. And, as there's so much information out there, and there's so much misinformation and disinformation, so it's cutting through the bullshit and giving the person who's in front of me what they need at that time to deal with, whatever problems they have coming up.
Yeah, sweet. And on that, so elite athletes, you've coached a number of them across different fight promotions, all that sort of stuff. How did that come about? How did you get in? How did you start training people like Peter Yan? Was that a proximity thing because of the gym you were training at, or how does that come about?
Yeah, like I said, I left Tasmania and moved to Thailand to put myself in that position where I was surrounded by athletes, and essentially just started chatting with them and offering free training. Yeah, and just spent time in the trenches working with them, and obviously started training martial arts myself, and essentially just trying to be the best that I could as a coach and constantly learning and implementing. And, I just let my work speak for itself. And after approaching a number of athletes and offering my services for free, I would then have athletes approaching me and asking if we could do some training. And Piotr Jan was one of those guys. I'd just finished coaching a group fitness class that he was in, and he came up to me and said, "Coach, I want to work with you." And then I tried to continue the conversation. I was speaking English, he was speaking Russian, couldn't really understand, so we ended up getting his manager into a meeting the next day, and his manager was like, "This guy's just, he's an ACB champion. He's just signed a contract with the UFC. He's making his debut in June of 2018. Are you willing to work with him for free?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, absolutely, let's go."
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I really like in that, I guess there's a little lesson that pops out for me, and that's just having a crack.
Yeah.
And just going and giving something a go.
Yeah.
And, I sort of think about, you've ran us through your whole lifetime, from a early age. And that's evident in everything you've done, from moving and getting into the workforce young, or, going into the military and just having a crack and having a go. And I think that's a great lesson that that anyone can sort of resonate with.
And obviously, just the comment you made, money's certainly not a motivating factor. You're doing it for nothing, just to get out there and do your training. So did you have any form of background in martial arts or Muay Thai? Or
No, nothing. So nothing. Come from a rugby background, obviously military background. And, it's one of those things, man. Like, I just know from experience and from the way that my life's played out that, if I dedicate myself to something, I can be as good as I want to be, and that's kind of why I didn't go down the route of becoming a professional rugby player, because I was, I'm decent. I'm a decent athlete, but I was constantly playing against these guys that were at a higher level, and I was like, all right, for me to get to the next level, I need to devote this much more. Do I want to go down this path, or do I want to go down this other path? And, it wasn't a guarantee that I would end up becoming a professional athlete of the level that I wanted to compete at. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go and join the army and tick this box and, serve my country. And obviously once I became a soldier, then I was like, I want to be the best soldier that I can. Like, where can I go? I want to go special forces. That's the end state after a couple of years, once I get some experience in the infantry battalions. And then obviously was recognised for my soldiering skills and nominated for the sniper's course and went down that route. So, yeah, I think it's dedication, really.
Just putting in the effort.
Just showing up, man, doing the work, and enjoying what I do as well. I think that's a big part of being successful is just, showing up, doing the work, being consistent. I think a lot of people these days just kind of float through, don't really feel like they have to try that hard to do what they need to do and have a safe, easy life. Nothing wrong with being safe and easy, but again, when life throws shit at you, how are you going to deal with that if you haven't put yourself in a position to train through and get through adversity? So, that's always been a big part of my life philosophy, I think, is just get out there and do shit. People are going to say you can't do it, but at the end of the day, like, the only person's opinion that matters is your own. As long as you can back it up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I suppose, like, there's that other people's opinion seems to be a big, factor as to why people don't go and do something that they perhaps enjoy or chase something that they want to do, is because they're fearful of what others might say, whether that be about the venture itself or if they fail. People are often, worried about that feedback or what people might say.
And I think, family and friends that do not, I don't want to say shoot down your goals and dreams and stuff like that, but I don't think people are saying those things to be harmful.
No.
I think they're saying it out of love.
Best interest.
Best interest. They want to look after you and make sure that you don't shoot for the stars and then fail. But, where does that get you?
Safe and easy.
Safe and easy. Yeah, but then that causes issues when life does kick you in the dick.
And I think
Which it will.
Yeah.
Which it will, 100%. Yeah.
exactly. It's that generation at the moment where so much is given to someone, and they don't have to work for too much, and it's there's not too many 14-year-old kids carting 30 ton of concrete round daily. You know what I mean? It's just like you want me to what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much of your experience, prior to military, but particularly in the military, has crossed over into your training philosophy?
Yeah, great question. I had this conversation with one of my mates the other day, Anzac Day a couple of days ago. So caught up with a heap of my mates, and we're all having this conversation about how training's going and what we're doing these days, and the big thing, the big theme that came from those conversations were, we're all kind of in our late 30s, early 40s. We're all training, we're all still consistent, but it's just the way that we train now is different. We're not smashing ourselves every day. Back then, as a soldier, it became like we're training our mindset and our mental resilience as well as our physical resilience. But, nowadays it's more about, bulletproofing the body so that we can go hard and we can smash ourselves and go into the pain cave when we need to. In recon snipers, our motto was there is no off season. So we kind of, that's still transitioned, and that carries over into my training philosophy now. I'm training all year round. It's just a matter of how I'm training. Sometimes I'm training, for a goal and a specific outcome. I had my first amateur boxing fight last weekend. So the last couple of months has been kind of that gain mentality where I'm like, I need to be fit enough, strong enough, fast enough, have good enough conditioning to be able to go in and have a fight with another man. But now, I'll probably go into a maintain phase where I'm just going to, look after the body a little bit more and maybe lift a little bit more weights. I wasn't really doing any strength work. It was mostly conditioning. But now I'm going to get back into the gym and just take care of the body and, shore up the joints and do some stability-based work and corrective exercise and, add in that injury prevention work to keep my, to basically rebuild my body, bulletproof the joints, so that when I go into the next phase of gain where, I want to fight again, for example, then I'm in a good position to then put the foot on the floor and work hard towards something. But in saying that, there's also like a minimize the damage type phase, right? When you get back from deployment and you go on leave for 2 months, I might not necessarily be smashing myself in the gym. It's more about like, all right, I'm just going to train because it's good for my mental health, it's good for my physical health, but I also don't want to be the guy that gets back to work and I'm dragging my ass everywhere and I'm coming last in everything, So I think periodization's one of those things that's obviously going through different training cycles and preparation for deployments, post-deployments, courses, etc. It's kind of built into the year, and that's carried over and it's built into my day-to-day life and each month, each phase, each year.
So on that, you mentioned in defence, it's sort of built in, right? So as is PT, it's sort of all taken out of your hands a little bit within the work day. You can do your own stuff outside of that. For those of us in, say, the first responder world, police, fireys, ambos and stuff like that, who perhaps don't have that structure. We don't have, this is what we're doing today. This is these are the exercises we're doing. Where can we start to get an idea about some of the things or some of the exercises or programming that we can be doing? Because it's sort of not provided. I can't speak for every organisation, but the ones that I've had experience with don't provide necessarily that. And we don't have, obviously, the information and the knowledge that you have. Is it worthwhile people seeking out, strength and conditioning coaches, or, where can someone start?
I think there's always value in seeking out coaches. Mentioned earlier, a coach is going to help you cut through the bullshit. They're going to ask the right questions, which are then going to guide you towards information required to provide the answers. So yeah, I think a coach is always a good solution. If you don't want to invest in a coach, I think just looking at what humans are capable of from a movement perspective and saying what do we naturally do. We have these primal movement patterns of squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, carry, crawl. So if we can kind of implement big compound movements and tick those boxes, we're going to be 80% there.
Yeah, right.
If we can do those things the majority of the time and then add in some isolation-based work. So many people, when I first joined the army, most of our information came from bodybuilding magazines. So everyone's doing the old bro split, like legs one day, back one day, chest another day, shoulders, arms, etc. Whilst there is some value in training like that, I don't think there's a whole lot of value in doing that type of training all year round. When I get back to Thailand, I'm probably going to do a little bit of that, to rebuild the body for a month or two. But, essentially we want to train movement, not muscles, the majority of the time. In our line of work, you need to be strong. You need to be fit. You need to have decent stamina. If you're carrying heavy loads for long periods, or even just not even for distance, but just being able to operate with load on your shoulders or on your hips and being able to operate at, a minimum standard, I think there's value in training strength, endurance, and just being a capable, functioning human that's able to run, carry, jump, climb, crawl, lift, multiple directions, multiple positions. I like awkward stuff, like sandbag carries and stuff like that, where you're using like offset loads. I think that's very functional type training.
It's got a real world application as well.
Yeah.
And then I guess particularly in our roles as well, I'm just thinking, it's always awkward. There's never when you go out, I guess, training in the gym where everything is not easy, but it's controlled.
It's more like one-dimensional.
Yeah, versus like going into a complex situation or the real world where things are awkward, things are not evenly distributed, all that sort of stuff. Is that sort of why you like that awkward stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot more functional, carries over to real world scenarios that you're likely to encounter.
Yeah, it's I just think even for myself like that, like I said, there's so much misinformation, disinformation. It's so hard to discern what even some of those terms you use, like what's the difference between endurance, strength, like some of these things. Is there a definition for those things, or is it different? Do they have different meanings depending on different people?
Yeah, it's a good question. As a strength and conditioning coach, I'm going through a needs analysis with my athletes. So, the questions I'm going to ask you is like, what does strength mean to you? And when you're going through the recruiting process, what is a strength? What is a measure of strength in the Fireys? You need to be able to climb up a ladder wearing all of your gear.
Yes. You
need to be able to drag a dummy. You need to be able to drag a hose.
Yep.
You need to be able to fire that hose at something and hit the target. So, there's going to be some strength requirements to be able to do those things. But then there's also going to be endurance components. Maybe you need to carry that thing for 1 kilometer now.
Yeah.
Or maybe you need to, so it really depends on the person I'm talking to. But, again, ticking boxes is essentially what we want to do with strength and conditioning. We want to look at what the physical requirements are to complete the job, and then what are the things that we can do to build those attributes.
So again, similar to that conversation you had with your team, it's looking at the end state. What do we desire? And then working back from that.
Yep.
How do we get there?
Yep.
Now, can you do that for a whole population? So, how you just sort of said, what are the strengths you need? And you gave 4 or 5 examples of things we need to do. So let's just use the fire service as an example. Everyone in the fire service needs to be able to do that. All the firefighters need to be able to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
can we then implement a program for everybody to achieve those things?
Yeah, I think if we looked at, I mean, let's workshop this now. If I said to you guys, what's a lower body strength test? What would you say?
Or squats?
Squats, yeah.
Lunges, yeah.
Squats, lunges. What's a good standard that every man joining the police force or fireys or whatever should be able to meet? Let's have a standard for men. Let's have a standard for women.
Well, I don't know, body weight?
Body weight, yeah. That's a pretty good standard. Sweet. Let's set that. What's something else that we need to do in the job? Need to be able to carry stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. What's a good standard that we should be able to meet?
I guess you could measure that in any number of ways, like a farmer's carry type thing.
Yeah,
or
farmer's carry. Perfect. At what? Half body weight?
Yep.
We need to carry a person out and there's two of us, half weight each.
Yep.
Sweet. Let's do a farmer's carry for 100 meters. Can you hold on to these things without putting them down for 100 meters at half body weight?
Yep.
Sweet. Can we probably need to be able to do pull-ups or something?
Yeah, get
Climb.
upper body strength.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
Yep.
For sure. Maybe we could add some strength endurance there and go, all right, let's set a target of like a 1 minute hang. Is a pretty good target.
Yep.
What about some conditioning based work?
Yes, obviously you've got to be able to have a good cardiovascular base to be able to, operate in those environments as well. So
For sure.
20 to 30 minute bursts,
Yep. Yep. So might be like 5 kilometer run,
Yep.
for example.
with a time
A time cap.
cap.
Yep. Power outputs. We go with like a jump or some form of throw. Sometimes you're probably going to need to throw something.
Yep.
So maybe some form of medicine ball throw. Maybe what's a weight that you would typically carry?
Oh, so
Or the
20 kilos?
cutters, spreaders.
20 kilos? Around 20?
Yeah. So maybe you need to throw that 5 meters or something.
Yep.
Yep. So, just off the top of our heads, we've come up with some standards that everyone really should be able to meet. Because at the end of the day, like if you guys get called out and you need to do your job, then, if you can't meet those standards, then you're possibly a liability.
Well, I guess the community and people on the other end of the services, whether that be, police, fire, ambo, defence, whatever, have an expectation that you're able to do those.
For sure.
You're able to have the physical and mental capacity to carry out that role. And I suppose, I don't know, if you don't measure it, you don't know.
Yeah.
Really, because it's just subjective then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless you're doing it on a constant basis.
Yeah.
So I guess you need to have measurable tools to be able to know that you're at standard or not.
For sure.
And then, so further to that, Cobes, we just sort of, nutted out a couple of rough exercises. So is it once you've got that end state there, you can then build that program out for that population? Is that sort of...
Yeah, 100%.
You just be like, okay, well, we need, obviously that strength and endurance or whatever. Can then everybody follow that program to an extent to then build that, those skills or attributes?
Of course. I mean, if we put, we do this a lot. We put people into populations. This population is going to require these physical attributes. This population is going to require similar physical attributes, but with different testing protocols. For example, building strength, building endurance, building speed, building power, building energy system conditioning. These are all outcomes, desirable outcomes. And it's about using the tools available to then, define the protocols to then get us to those outcomes. So we can use the same training program for, here's the thing, man. Everyone should be able to hinge, lunge, squat, push, pull, carry, crawl, climb, run, etc. But it's a matter of, like, what are those standards for each individual population?
Yeah, yep. So those things you said, everyone should be able to do that regardless of job.
Correct. As a human,
You should be able to.
you should be able to do that. As a hunter-gatherer back in the day, you need to be able to, run.
Yeah.
You need to be able to carry shit. You need to be able to chop wood. You need to be able to, just be a capable human being so you can contribute to the tribe.
Yep.
And I think we're losing that. I think most people are losing the physical literacy to just be able to do shit.
100%. And this might be going on a bit of a tangent or whatever, but I do tend to agree there. And perhaps that's because, a lot of our jobs are transitioning from, manual labour, from agriculture, from that into more sedentary style jobs, potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. We're losing the ability to kind of move as humans.
Yeah, and I guess it's a necessity-driven thing.
Yeah.
If you've got that sedentary job, it's not a necessity.
Yeah.
So therefore, we need to actively work on that. And then by extension, in our jobs, I believe that our first responder military jobs, that physicality or physical capability forms the basis of everything that you do. So that the more physically capable you are, then the more mentally capable you are as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a fair statement to make, but I don't know. That's the word.
Sounds good to me, mate. Yeah, I mean, you have to be physically capable, man. I mean, as a soldier, there was times, as a sniper, there was times where we'd go out on 5-day tasks and my gear is like 60, 70 kilos. And I'm at altitude walking over fucking mountains, man. Like, if you're not physically capable, then you probably shouldn't be in that job.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you become like I said before, you become a liability.
Yeah.
If you can't do the requirements of that, whatever the role is.
Well, there's a reason there's physical standards for these types of jobs.
Mm.
And if you go to like the elite level, like special forces, there's a reason why there's those physical standards there. If you don't meet the physical standards, you don't go any further. That's the first barrier to entry.
100%. And then I guess so the follow-on from that, like you said, that's the barrier to entry. And every organisation has that. Follow-on to that is the maintenance and the longevity piece. Like, I'm assuming if, the better physical condition you're in, I guess the more stronger, the more capable you are, the less likely you are for injury as well.
Yeah, for sure. The less time you're going to need to take off work because you are injured, because you're physically capable and resilient and you can handle the stresses of the job.
Mm. And I think too that the risk, like if, certainly in your world, Shaun, and ours, if something goes wrong, whether it be on the battlefield or within an incident, if you can go back and hand on your heart say, I was at my peak condition. Unfortunately, I was trained to my full capability. Unfortunately, stuff happens. Mm-hmm. Whereas you spin that on its head, if you're not at your peak condition and you haven't put in the work, that sits heavy on anybody, certainly if a life's lost.
Absolutely.
That's a mind wrestle that you've got to deal with of saying, was I where I needed to be? No, I wasn't. Mm-hmm. Now, has that effectively caused that situation, which,
Again, goes back to those conversations, like, we need to ask the right questions.
Mm.
Like, if push comes to shove and I do need to respond to an incident and, I do need to, lift something or move something or, be physically capable to be able to, save a life essentially, and you're not at those standards, then, have you left something on the table?
Mm.
It's a legitimate question.
Yeah, definitely. So often you'll hear, and I mean, you've heard every excuse in the book, I'm sure, but often you'll hear, I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
What do you say to that? Because, I mean, we had a conversation off air previously with a little package that you're putting together.
Yeah. Again, like, is that going to be an excuse when someone's lost their life and you haven't been capable, you haven't been able to do, meet the minimum standards because you don't have time? Well, every job that I've ever done, you mentioned it before, it's shifting 20 tons of cement. That was what I was doing when I left home at 14 and went into the workforce. Every job that I've been in required some form of physicality. So as in the army, it's part of your job.
Mm.
You do PT first thing in the morning. You know, so it's one of those things, like if it's a requirement for your work, how can you not find time? It's part of your work.
It should be making time.
Exactly. And, you know, we mentioned it earlier, you don't need to have an hour to be able to train. You just need to allocate a period of time to tick some boxes. You know, something I mentioned before we started recording, it was during COVID, I was playing around with splitting my days up. I was recording podcast episodes, I was studying, I was, you know, doing social media content, YouTube, etc. And I would break my days up with like 3 20-minute blocks. And I'd do mobility first thing in the morning, and then I'd do some strength around lunchtime, and then I'd do some conditioning in the afternoon. And then the following day I'd switch that, and I'd do my conditioning first thing in the morning, and then the mobility, and then the strength, and the following day I'd switch that again. And, you know, it helped break up the days, but it also helped reinvigorate me in between those blocks of 3 to 4 hours of work, where I'd go and get some training in. You know, I don't have an hour to smash myself and I'm running myself into the ground and coming out of that tired. I'd actually come out of that and be like, maybe I might be tired for 10, 15 minutes, and then I'd have some food and rehydrate, and then like I get this energy boost, you know. So I think that's a great way of incorporating some form of movement and exercise into your day, is kind of breaking your day up into exercise snacks, so to speak. And I mean, we mentioned it before about like those standards of body weight squat. You might literally walk into the gym. I like to do this where I use one piece of equipment and the whole training session is focused on that one piece of equipment and what I can do with it. I might walk into the gym and just throw a barbell on my back, empty barbell, sit down into a deep squat, you know, shift my hips back and forth, drive my knees over my ankles, use that weight to push me down into these deep squat positions where I can start building resilience in the tissues in those elongated, compressed positions. And then I start adding weight on top of that, and then, you know, maybe I get 20 reps out, and then I go a little bit heavier and I get 15 reps out, and I go a little bit heavier, I get 10 reps out, I go a little bit heavier, I get 5 reps out, you know. And that might take me, I might get a couple of sets at 5 reps. That's my training session. And then the next day I'll go in, all right, that was a lower body focus session. I might go in, do some upper body focus work, where I might do a 1 minute hang, or maybe 40 seconds, and then I'll do 20 seconds worth of push-ups, and then I'll rest a minute, and I'll do that again. Repeat that multiple times. You know, the next day maybe I just grab hold of some weights and I just walk for a minute, minute on, minute off, minute on, minute off, get some farmer's carries in. You know, again, I'm ticking those boxes. I don't need that much time, 10, 15, 20 minutes. I'm ticking those boxes. I'm getting those physical attributes in. I'm building those attributes on a daily basis. People confuse movement. People confuse, you know, they try and complicate things too much. I might simply focus on one thing. I like Turkish get-ups. Get into the gym, do 10 Turkish get-ups each side, building up to the heaviest weight that you can handle. That's it, session done.
What's a Turkish get-up?
Essentially where you lay down on the ground, have a kettlebell or a dumbbell in the hand, arms facing towards the ceiling, shoulder locked out, and then I stand up, and then I get back down. That's
Super
it.
simple.
Super simple, man. And the ability to stand up off the ground is an indicator of longevity. Being able to get up and get back down is an indicator of longevity. If you can't do that, then probably going to have some issues. You know, a lot of people, my pop passed away because he fell and broke his hip. And when I found out about that, I said to my mum, I was like, listen, the odds are not good that he's going to recover from that. A lot of people die from that because they don't have the strength to you know, recover. And at that point, when things are kind of breaking down and bone density is decreasing, then, you know, you get a break there, it's going to be very hard to recover from. So ideally, we want to load the tissues, load the scaffolding, the skeleton, to keep our bone density for as long as possible. Because once that gets brittle, man, like we're in trouble.
That's it. Yeah.
Essentially, just keep moving.
Yeah.
Just don't stop moving.
Yeah. What's the saying? We don't stop moving when we get old. We get old when we stop moving.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I like that one.
And also, I like that shorter bites as well, because I think maybe a barrier to entry, especially if you've had some time off training, or maybe you just haven't trained for whatever reason, it might be, I don't want to go for an hour, hour and a half and kill myself,
Yeah.
you know, but if you can go and do that 15, 20 minutes,
Yeah.
I think it's way more accessible to a far greater amount of people. And it's certainly a different way to look at it as well. So
Yeah.
you're still getting that total, I guess, volume in, but in different, smaller
Yeah, exactly.
bites.
It's kind of like the Pomodoro technique when it comes to, you know, cognitive work. It's like, I don't know, it's like 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off.
Yep.
You know, we can do the same thing with training. We don't need to fit all of our training into a 1 hour window or a 1 hour block. You know, this is something I talk about with my clients all the time. Training should be adding to our day, not taken away from it. So if I'm busting myself in the gym and, like I said, I'm taking hours to recover afterwards, I'm foggy and I'm tired, then I've probably done too much. So, you know, doing these exercise snacks, so to speak, is a great way of, you know, getting some good quality work in. Like I said, reinvigorating yourself whilst also ticking those boxes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that, and I think I might give it a go, actually, now that you've said that.
Yeah.
So, mate, I just want to ask you, you know, we're lucky enough to sit down and chat with you while you're here in Australia. You said you're based in Thailand and you've been there for a while now. What's on the cards for you?
I'm in the process of building out my online training app, which is essentially taking the system that I've built over 13 years in the trenches, working with everyday people and elite level athletes, and making it accessible to everybody, and having options for, again, like, you've only got 10 minutes. Here's a 10-minute training session focused on mobility, which I don't think we've mentioned it online, but offline we spoke about the yoga course that I did prior to COVID. And, you know, the first 20 minutes of the day was like, all right, I'm going to go and do some yoga, and I'm going to see how I can adjust these variations of these templates that I've been given, these shapes that we're making, to fit in with my strength and conditioning background, how I can use these movements to prepare my athletes for a training session. So, you know, kind of covering mobility and then stability. Again, stability for me is like, let's bulletproof the joints. You know, let's ensure that we're able to take our joints into as many ranges as we can, as they're capable of, under load, with control. And then, you know, we go into some potentiation-based work where it might be, you know, this is the actual work or the stuff that transitions from the warm-up into the work, so to speak, of a training session, whether that's strength or power or speed or conditioning or whatever. So I'm basically building 6 months of automated coaching in the training app. Phase 1 is kind of entry level, teaching people these exercise snacks, mobility, stability, potentiation, linking that in with like workouts of the day, for example. So, you know, you can take this 10-minute session, you can link it to this 10-minute session, you can link it to this 10-minute session. You've got a 30-minute training session that's going to tick these boxes and, you know, make you feel better, and also, you know, add in some injury prevention work. And, you know, this is the sort of stuff that I do leading into a training session. If I've gone to a rugby training, for example, then, you know, this is stuff that prepares you. This is the warm-up tools, essentially. So that's phase 1, 10, 20, 30-minute training sessions. And then phase 2 is a 2-month program, strength and conditioning, which takes elements of phase 1, links them together for the warm-up, and then goes into strength protocols and conditioning protocols. And then phase 3 is a 3-month program, and that's where it's essentially the programs and the system that I use with these athletes. If I've only got them for 2 to 3 times a week for a couple of hours, then, you know, I need to tick as many boxes as possible whilst giving them, providing the stimulus that they require for adaptation, to then, you know, allow them to get the most out of their skills-based session and implement their training plan or their game plan when it comes to fight night. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on over the next couple of months, building the online training platform. I'm going to kick off my podcast again at some stage in the near future that's kind of going to tie in with these protocols, and having conversations with guys like you, and, you know, getting other coaches on and just having conversations of, like, for this type of demographic, what are the tools that we're going to be utilizing, how are we going to use them. And yeah, I'm looking to get another fight in as well. I had my first boxing fight last weekend, had a amateur MMA fight a couple of years ago. I want to get a Muay Thai fight while I'm in Thailand as well, so I'll be back over to Thailand for a couple of months as an athlete primarily, whilst also working on the online training programs. Yeah.
Awesome. So the online training program, that's a general athletic preparations program, so anyone can do it, not just like, say, fighters or
Correct.
athletes.
It is recommended to have some form of training background. It's not recommended for, you know, people who just want to burn body fat or they're just overweight or whatever. You know, I expect you to have some form of movement literacy to get the most out of the training programs. Probably a little bit more advanced than the average training.
Yeah, okay. But whoever does it, it'll build them like holistically.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's like I said, as a strength and conditioning coach, going back to conversation earlier, you know, I need to understand mobility, stability, injury prevention, rehabilitation. How do I get stronger? How do I get bigger? How do I get faster? You know, how do I build my engine? How do I stay injury free? You know, so, and how do I eat and fuel to support these adaptations? How does sleep play into this? Yeah, it's a very holistic approach, and for the average person, it's probably going to be one of the best training programs you followed.
And by extension, it would suit, say, people like police, ambos, fireys too.
100%.
Because all of those 10 elements plus the sleep, nutrition, all that sort of stuff is all going to help you perform better.
Absolutely. I mean, this is I'm not one of those coaches that says do this without having done it myself. Like, everything I've been doing has been refined from years in the trenches doing this shit myself. And like I said, you know, I had my first amateur boxing fight last weekend. I still play rugby. I turned 40 in 2 months. You know, my body's good. I perform well. This is all the shit that keeps me in the game all year round, to be able to go and fucking hike through the mountains in the Himalayas for a couple of weeks, to go and play rugby on the weekend and not get injured, to, you know, step in the ring and have a fight. It's all the same stuff that I've been using with myself, with my athletes, with my clients for many, many years. And just now's the time where, you know, I don't want to be exchanging time for money. In person, you know, on the gym floor, coaching people all day. You know, I want some of my time back. So the best way for me to do that is to, you know, take this system that I've developed over 13 years in the trenches and, you know, put it online so that everyone can use it in a way that suits them.
Just a thought. You know, once that system rolls out, is that something that an organisation could approach you and implement that with, if they so choose to?
Yeah, for sure. That's something that I'll be chasing up as well. As once things are in place, then I'm going to be, you know, approaching some of the organisations and people that I know to be like, hey man, I want to offer this to your guys. You know, I want to get people into the system. I want to get feedback. I want to constantly update and iterate. And essentially what I want to do is provide a high quality service that you would get in person with me through an online platform. And then provide, well, that's the training side of things, but then also provide the coaching as well that gets implemented into that mindset, discipline, resilience, consistency, you know, all that type of stuff, and build out a holistic model.
So is that stuff, at the moment, the system is just the training portion, and that, is it the nutrition, sleep, resilience, mental side, that'll come?
That will come, that's content's there. It's basically all of the content, 500 plus YouTube videos, 172, odd podcasts. I'm just going to pick bits and pieces of that and then implement. Essentially, if you sign up for 6 months, you get a 1-minute video every day for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Covering different things. Week 1 is mindset. Week 2 is discipline. Week 3 is consistency. Week 4 is resilience. Week 5 is da-da-da-da-da-da. And have a theme for each week.
You're right.
So all that content's there, ready to go. It's a fucking monster, man. But I'm excited. I'm excited to be working on it because I know how much of an impact it's going to have for the people that sign up for the process.
Right.
100%. And my mind goes straight away to like what a benefit organisations could have on their workforces
For sure.
if that information is getting fed into their people.
Yeah.
At something that's so holistic, that education piece about what people can do to sort of safeguard them. I can imagine, that would reduce injury, work cover, and all of those
Improve
sort
productivity
of
and well-being, and
all of that sort of stuff. I think that would be pretty good tools by the sound of it.
yeah.
Fingers crossed,
I'm
man.
excited for it, mate.
Yeah,
Looking forward
sounds
to
good. So when that's out, mate, can you let us know, because we can add that to the show notes and
Absolutely.
give people the
I appreciate it.
so they can have access to that, because I'd be very interested in that.
On that, show notes just prompted me, mate. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
If you want something, information to do with these programs I'm talking about, some of these are already in the archives, ready to go. Info at coachedbykobes, coachedbykobes.com. If you just want to have a general conversation, ask me some questions, you want to be pointed in the right direction, probably Instagram at coach_Kobes. YouTube channel is at Live Train Perform. Podcast is Live Train Perform.
Sweet. Happy days. We'll chuck all of
Definitely.
that in the show notes as well.
Appreciate it, fellas.
Mate, thank you once again for your time, sharing some of your knowledge. As Jando said, we keep it an ear to the ground to see when you drop that new stuff, mate, and
Lovely.
I think you'll have a couple of customers here.
Appreciate it, fellas. Great conversation.
And mate, honestly, thanks for your service as well. It's
Thank you.
much appreciated.
Legends.
Too good. Thanks, mate.
Thanks,
Cheers,
mate.
boys.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your support by subscribing, liking, and rating the podcast on your listening and social media platforms. We are always looking to improve what we do. If you have feedback, suggestions for further guests, topics, or would like to be a guest yourself, please contact us via Instagram.
Stop the scene.